This is a roll-up garage door, and behind me is the gap where it's going to go.
Right, straight to it, no mucking around on this one. We had to get these unpacked and up as soon as possible. The rain was coming and we wanted to close off the workshop. This is going to be part of a larger series of workshop build out, so this is kind of part one with the installation of the doors going in. I guess you could say the roof was part one, but I wasn't really thinking about a series until we started doing this because there's so much more to do with the workshop. We have electrics to do, we have spacing out the machinery, we have lighting, we have all sorts of things to think about. Here we're just kind of getting the levels right, because if these doors are slightly out and not level, they kind of want to jump out their tracks or they stick fast. So you have to get the verticals exactly right. So one technique of doing that is to fix it in the middle and measure the bottom or the lower measurement and make sure it is exactly the same as the middle one. Here are the top brackets which hold the door being fastened in with some pretty serious coach screws into the wall, as it's kind of a lot of weight for it to be holding up there. Again, kind of checking the levels, just making sure it's exactly level so that the door can run true down those tracks once it's unraveling. We encountered a little trouble with one of the stoppers, or actually the stoppers on each track, so we had to drill them out, reposition them and pop rivet them back in so that they weren't in the way. I think this was a kind of a manufacturing fault, but it's an easy fix. It's just down to quality control, I would assume. And once we had done all that, the door could finally go up onto the brackets and sit in its U-bolt clamps. There's a little bit of a fiddliness to this door, which we found is that you actually have to clamp it, make sure it's level, and then only cut the plastic. You can see it's still wrapped in plastic, and that's because it's kind of it's spring loaded, and if you just cut the plastic off, it unravels and it's no good. So the job is to get it up there, make sure it's in the right spot, and when you feel comfortable, you cut the plastic off and feed the door right through the correct channels. Otherwise you just end up with a giant mess on the floor and a door that you cannot put back together. The next step in the process was to tension the springs. This helps the door coil up into a nice tight roll when you lift the door up, or when you roll the door up. It's a kind of a two-man job and you have to do it with some pipe wrenches. You tension the spring up and fasten it in place, and then it pulls itself up basically. So after we installed this first door, we kind of had to change our plans a little bit. You can see we're cutting off some thread bar there, which we're actually going to bolt on some large swinging barn style doors. But we liked the ease of the roll-up doors so much that we just decided to put a second one in the middle. And we'd only bought two for the project, but we went out a few days later and bought a third one to fill up the final entrance to the workshop over there. So here we are installing the second one. I don't need to talk you through it, we've just been through that, which is why I kind of sped it up. You can sort of see the whole process in one, all the way from dropping the doors down to tensioning the spring up, and it's pretty much as simple as that. So a little bit of tidying up towards the end of the day, and because we only had two doors at this stage, that was all we could fit into one sort of installation. And like I said previously, we went back a few days later and got a third door. Last little bit of farm chores for the day, getting the sheep in, and yeah, you can see the sunsets are incredible around here. So this is a few days later, and some of you might notice that we're working on a door that we did at the beginning of the video. The reason is we had to switch this door right over to the other side because the only other door they had in stock was much narrower and only fit on this side. A bit of a pain, but no big deal. These doors only take about half an hour to install. Now that all the doors were installed, we could start working on the locking mechanisms. You just mark them through the little guides that they give you, and the best way to do it is kind of just get a high-speed metal drill in there and drill out a couple of holes on each side. Use a round file and kind of just create a little channel for the locking arms to go through. I realize this is not a great looking position, but it's got to be done. The locking mechanism requires very little assembly. It's just a central lock which you pop through to the outside of the door and screw fast the handle, and the arms turn with the key and extend into those channels, kind of very simply locking the door. That's just the pull-up handle, and you're ready to go. Simple as that. Here needs a bit more explanation. These are in the center of the workshop, the existing old exterior doors of the workshop, and these we had to remove to open up the entire space, but they weighed an absolute ton.
Well, we currently have load shedding. If you don't know what that is, just Google it and you'll see. It's one of South Africa's big embarrassments. So we're going to fire up the generator to power the angle grinder to cut the hinges off this door so we can remove it, open up the workshop.
Yes, one of the big pains we have to live with here in South Africa are planned power outages. Basically the grid cannot support all the demand on it, so they systematically load shed, where they switch off entire neighborhoods for hours and hours at a time, so that they don't blow up the national grid basically. These doors needed a bit of persuasion, and we cut the hinges off because they weren't going to be used again. Like I said previously, we changed our minds and put roll-up doors along the front. So these were the doors that were going to swing out, but they were, definitely took second place. This was definitely going to be a temporary fix, as we figured out what we wanted to do, if we wanted to put in double doors or another roll-up door. So we kind of just put them in place, but they do need to be neat. So we had to find the center point of the doorway to make sure the doors were evenly spaced out. And because we get very strong east and west winds here, this was facing directly west, we had to sort of barricade it in and just fasten it temporarily to the top truss and put a floor support in as well. Here we're getting stuck in on the second set of doors that needed to be cut off and removed out of the workshop to open the entire space up. These weren't going to be used inside the workshop, so they could just go up against the side of it in the meantime, while we kind of figure out what we have to do with them as well. I mean, things like these never go to waste in a place like this, so they will definitely be repurposed at some point. Maybe a chicken hutch or another roof of something. We'll figure it out. That was pretty much it, and we got all the kids and the family in to help us tidy up and try and rearrange the workshop to see what it's going to look like eventually. So thank you for following along. I hope you get as much pleasure as I do as I watch these things come together. Really appreciate your support, and you could show that by subscribing or sharing this video. It would really help us out. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon on the next one.